Take one.
Hello, welcome to Meet Me at the Movies. Noel T. Manning II here, and I got to say, I really appreciate having guests on this show. We've had Adam Long. If you're familiar with this show, if you've watched us, you know Adam Long's been a kind of a recurring guest from time to time. And one of the things I like about having guests on the show is you get a chance to hear from a variety of different viewpoints, and it gives you a chance to explore the minds and the hearts of others out there, and I really love that aspect. And something else is it's a networking opportunity. Many times I will be asked to be a part of something they're doing, and that recently happened with Adam. Adam has a segment on YouTube that you can find called Adam's Corner. And he invited me to come on and talk about someone that I've known for a long time, Mr. Earl Owensby. Earl and I go back a number of years, and Adam wanted to talk about that relationship and talk about Earl's films and Earl's history. And so had a chance to do that. And we thought, well, why not share that with you here on Meet Me at the Movies? And we may be doing more of this as we look at Earl's filmography going back to 1973. So hope you enjoy this conversation that I was on the other side where Adam was asking me questions about things. So I hope you enjoy this Meet Me at the Movies special combination of Meet Me at the Movies and Adam's Corner as we talk Earl Owensby.
Welcome again to another episode of Adam's Corner. Today I am joined by not only a guest, but a good friend, Mr. Noel Thomas Manning. We've done a lot of things together over the years, and he is just a really good wealth of information, a good friend to have, and we always enjoy bantering it up on his show. And so today, we are having him on to talk about somebody that is very important to the North Carolina film scene, I would say, and that's Earl Owensby, who did something really unique in the 1970s, and we'll get to that here in just a bit. But Earl Owensby basically was the first independent filmmaker, I guess you would say, the best way to put it, to do something of that nature in North Carolina. But he's a legend around these parts, and again, like I said, we'll get into that. But furthermore, you made a documentary in 1997, I think was the release date on that, about Earl and his career. And you can see in the video here, the video version, the man, the myth, Earl Owensby. And so before we get into the nuts and bolts of his career, I just thought I would ask you how you got to know him first. I was just curious about that, how you connected with him.
Adam, first, thanks for inviting me on your show. It's always good spending time with you, and I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this, to celebrate Earl, who officially launched his career in filmmaking. Talking about Earl Owensby, kind of a North Carolina pioneer, a legendary pioneer for filmmaking. In 1973, it was November 10th, 1973, was when he started making his very first film called Challenge. And I know we're going to be covering some of that, but I'm just happy to be here as we talk about that and celebrate that. The way I met Earl Owensby was I was working for Shelby Headline News, which was a Headline News affiliate back in the 90s. And in 1993, it was the celebration of Earl's 20th anniversary of starting the studio. And it was my job to go and set up an interview and meet him. And that was the first time I'd ever met him. I'd heard of Earl for years. A really good friend of mine grew up in Shelby. And so the first time I'd heard Earl's name was when he was filming and working on the film called Rottweiler, Dogs from Hell. And the catchphrase from that was Jaws with Paws. And but a friend of mine was telling me about how 60 Minutes, CBS's 60 Minutes, had come to Shelby to do this feature on Earl Owensby, this North Carolina filmmaker, and I'd never heard of Earl until that time. And so that was my first introduction, and hearing the stories from my friends named Jack Lewis, who grew up here in Shelby, and hearing those Earl stories from here really intrigued me. And so when I got a chance to move to this area in the late 80s, to go to Gardner Webb University. Continued to hear about Earl and met people who knew Earl, but it was 1993 was that first time I got a chance to meet him. And I remember picking up the phone to call and schedule an appointment to see if I could get this interview. He picked up the phone, and I'm like, okay, I'm calling this movie studio, and the guy himself is picking up the phone, and that just really really surprised me. And I told him who I was, introduced myself, and said I'd love to interview you about your film career. He invited me over, and we spent an hour on that first meeting just talking about his entire kind of film legacy at that time. And from that point on, we became kind of fast friends. We really clicked. There was chemistry there from a standpoint of just a friendship that developed. And then a few years later, I wanted to kind of expand that research and the interviews I did in '93 and take it a step further. And that's where the documentary came out, Earl Owensby, the Man, the Myth. And I got to interview a lot of those who had worked with him over the years. And the North Carolina Film Commissioner interviewed him at that time and interviewed Earl's ex-wives. That was some fun stuff there, I got to tell you.
Isn't it always? Isn't it always? Yeah, I first became aware of Earl. My dad was a social worker in Gaston County, which is not far from Cleveland County, where the studios are based. And a lot of the people that my dad worked with that were in his Gaston County social services, on the side, they were involved in the theater stuff, the local theater, I guess you would say. And a lot of these people, Earl had somehow or another, he was connected to a lot of the people in the Gaston County theater scene, and he cast a lot of these people in his films. So my dad knew these people. They were friends of his that had been in Earl's films, and he would come home and talk about this friend was in Earl's film, and that friend was in Earl's film. And then occasionally we would go to like a Christmas or a Halloween party at these people's houses that my dad would bring me along as a kid, and so I would go along with him, and they would talk about Earl. So he was in the conversation. And then I remember the first Earl Owensby film I actually saw was in a theater in 1979. Our local theater in Lincolnton, where I grew up, they were running Wolfman when it first came out. And so I was a big monster kid growing up. That was a big thing for me, and I got my mom to take me to see Wolfman. And so, yep, there it is, right there. And I have not seen it in 44 years, I've got to tell you. I have not
Wow.
seen it. And I need to go back and rewatch. But my mother took me to see it, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, I might feel differently now as we get older. You can see, but, when you're 9 years old, or I guess maybe I was 8 around the time I was in third grade, I really enjoyed it. And it wasn't long after that our local ABC affiliate, WSOC here, they would run on Saturday afternoons just films that they had, I guess, in their syndication package, and Challenge turned up on a Saturday afternoon. And so my dad and I watched that together. I was obviously too young to have seen Death Wish, and it's obviously a somewhat of a reworking of Death Wish, because that's what Earl would do. And we can talk about what he would do in terms of the projects he chose. He would kind of find a trend that was successful and do his own version of it. And you can talk a little bit about that. It's kind of definitely unique, not kind of, definitely unique, what he managed to do in rural North Carolina.
Yeah, when you talk to Earl about the big question of why did you choose this area instead of trying to do it in Hollywood, and he said, because this is where I live. I mean, that's his answer. This is where I lived. This was my home. I knew that you could do it. It was a business. You could turn it into a factory, basically a movie factory. That was his concept. And he said from the beginning, he never set out to just make one movie. He wanted to create a movie studio. That was his goal from the start. And the way he got the idea was he saw the movie Walking Tall, was a big fan of that movie. He liked Billy Jack. He liked those kinds of films. But Walking Tall was filmed in McMinnville, Tennessee, and it was done on a very low budget, and it made quite a bit of money. Mm-hmm. So Earl was thinking, well, hey, if they can do that in Tennessee, well, Shelby, North Carolina is not that far removed from McMinnville, Tennessee. And so that's where he kind of got the idea. He had been a very successful businessman on the outside, industrial tools, and had found a way to make money. And Earl truly was a salesman at heart and in mind, and still is. I mean, when you look at the marketing of what he did, it was Earl. The fact that 60 Minutes spent time coming to Shelby, North Carolina for a week or so, interviewing Earl and following him around the set and being a part of this community to learn about it was just incredibly fascinating. And you can't imagine something like that happening. 60 Minutes at that time was, the place to go for kind of that long form news. And when that episode aired, that particular episode that featured Earl, it was on the very same night as the Super Bowl. So that particular audience for that, and remember at that time, 82, cable was starting out, but not everybody had cable. So that the networks reigned still. And so that particular episode of 60 Minutes that featured Earl was one of the highest watched that entire year. And Earl would say, yeah, because it was B. He's like, okay, it's because it was the Super Bowl, but, I'm going to take a little bit of credit. You got to remember, now when we think about North Carolina filmmaking, a lot of people think about Wilmington and think about that portion of it, but that only happened because of Earl. And Earl and Dino De Laurentiis came together, and they were going to film a movie called Firestarter here. And they actually were going to use Earl's studios, and there was a little bit of a disagreement. And, talking to some of the people behind the scenes, they say, Earl's talking his southern cliffside, and you've got Dino talking his Italian, and that, you can't understand either one of them when they're going at each other. And so finally that movie ended up, Firestarter ended up being the start of creating this studio in Wilmington, North Carolina, that would have never happened had Earl not proved that you could make money and you could do it here in North Carolina. And others continued to follow. And it was amazing. 20th Century Fox came. They filmed, they had a few films. One of those was called Reuben with Tom Conti, and that got some love. Kelly McGillis in that as well. That was shot in Shelby and produced through Earl's studios, even though it was a 20th Century Fox production. Earl was connected to it. And there were several of those that would lease out the studios because they knew, hey, you got it, you got something here. Now, I'm going to go back to Firestarter real quickly. There were a lot of folks who had been cast. You're talking about those theater people. Earl did love to cast people who were in community theaters, whether it was Charlotte, Gastonia, even in Shelby, for his projects, and even those that were TV personalities like Larry Sprinkle and Mike McKay. They would show up in Earl's films because they had voices, they had presence, they knew what to do in front of a camera. And many of those that were cast initially in Firestarter, and even some of the crew that were going to be working with Earl when it was coming through Earl's, once Dino took it, they went and followed Dino, and ultimately that became kind of the launching point for many of these careers that they ended up going and working in Hollywood circles. It's really fascinating story, and it's one of those that it would be a fascinating movie when you really think about all that happened and how it happened and all the odds that were stacked against it actually finding success. Thank you for watching this Meet Me at the Movies Adam's Corner special as we talk about Earl Owensby. Stick around. We'll be right back after this quick intermission.
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick?
Can you hear them crying? Can you practice what you preach? And would you turn the other cheek?
How you doing today, ma'am?
Father, help us and some guidance from above. These people got me questioning. Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love? Where is the love? The love?
Come and meet me at the movies. Won't you come and watch a
So I hope you enjoy this Meet Me at the Movies special. Special combination of Meet Me at the Movies and Adam's Corner as we talk Earl Owensby.
Now, mister, you've got some nerve coming in here accusing one of our leading citizens of murder. Not one word of this can be backed up.
What about the ledgers? Did you see the ledgers?
I don't know what you're talking about. I do know this, though. I deal with trash like you day after day and year after year. That's all you'll ever be is trash, because people like you never learn to play the game.
And he came along at a time when that sort of thing could be done. There's timing is definitely an element in anybody's success, and he came along at a time when the drive-in movie, there was a market for specific types of films that were shown in drive-ins, and his product fit the bill for what was demanded of drive-in in drive-in theaters. And that was to me, it's a magical time that it's long gone and will never come again. And there's still drive-ins around, but they just show the normal programmers that you get in walk-in theaters. There were specific types of films. Exploitation is one genre that you would find, and his kind of sort of borderline on exploitation, I guess you would say, although he was always careful to point out no adult language in my films. There may be quite a bit of violence, but
you wouldn't find language, you wouldn't find sex scenes, nudity,
Right,
you wouldn't find that. I mean, there were several producers that tried to come to his studios to get him to shoot X-rated films, adult films at the time, and he was like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, all of his films were PG rated, I believe. From what
most of them PG. Now there were a few that ended up being released under like the unrated, because Dark Sunday was one of those that had so much violence that the Motion Picture Association of America, at that time MPAA, decided to give it an X rating for violence, and so Earl ended up taking the MPAA to court. And basically argued that, hey, if you compare mine to a Clint Eastwood film of the same type, talk about comparisons, you look at the bullet hits, you look at the deaths here in this Eastwood film, which is a studio product, and then you look at mine, compare the two, and the violence is the same, and yet you're going after the independents. And so basically, he kind of proved his point. And they were going to give it an R rating, and so he decided, and he actually argued. Here's the funny thing: he argued for a G rating on principle. He did it on principle. He argued for a G rating, and they ended up saying, okay, we'll release it. We'll give it an R rating, and so he decided, now I'm going to release it with a basically unrated. And he did that with that film, and then there was another slasher film that was shot through by alums from the Earl Owensby School of Filmmaking, I like to call it, and it was called Final Exam. And that one also went through the same kind of process, that they were going to slap an X rating on it because of violence. And so they ended up taking out some of the scenes where you, instead of seeing the close-ups of the slasher, going into somebody's chest with a sickle or whatever, they would show the sickle coming down, but then they would cut to the aftermath of it. And so they ended up going, I think, from 18 deaths to 12 that you could see, and that got them, a better rating.
Absolutely. Yeah, he, like I said, the timing was perfect for him in what he did, and that's, and so there was, and then later on the video era came along, and of course that changed things. The drive-in circuit was still around, as I said, but the types of films that were unique to drive-ins were not,
Yep.
unfortunately. And so, like I said, it was a real unique time that he chose to embark on this career path, and so. Yeah, and we can talk about some of the actual titles in his filmography. There are definitely some interesting ones. We can just but we talked about Challenge, obviously, is one of them, and then there was you talked about Dark Sunday. There's Death Driver, Wolfman we've spoken about, and then Living Legend, which is kind of a quasi reworking of the Elvis Presley story, and we can discuss that one. My dad wanted to see that one really, really badly, and it just didn't play around here that I'm aware of, or not in theaters in Lincoln. And I don't remember, I know it played, in places around the country, but interestingly enough, not here. And so it was only when it appeared on YouTube that I was able to get my dad a copy of it, and he finally got to see it. And there were quite a few of his office mates that appeared there, so in that one. So, but I guess it was Ginger Alden, who was an actual girlfriend of Elvis's, who appears in the film. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it was based on the life and struggles of Elvis. I mean, if you watch it, even though the character's name is Eli Cantfield, you can't help but look at it and know, okay, this is based on Elvis. So many aspects of the life of Elvis, and if you watched the Elvis film that came out, recently that got a lot of awards love. Back in, 2022, and then you look at Living Legend, you're like, wow, okay, there's some incredible similarities, some truths there. And one of the things that I loved about A Living Legend is Earl was able to recruit Roy Orbison to record the soundtrack, an original soundtrack for this film, and that's fascinating in itself. At that time, Roy was kind of in between his popularity before he kind of relaunched his career with the Traveling Wilburys, and had that incredible concert documentary, I think Roy Orbison and Black and White Night, that had a lot of guests on that. But this was kind of in between, and so it was a chance for Roy to do something new and do something different. And Roy lived here in Shelby during the filming of this. And I was speaking to Worth Keeter recently. Worth Keeter was the director for this particular film for Living Legend, and he talked about how Roy would kind of be in the studio and they would be recording audio stuff, and then they would send Worth the audio takes on reel, and then he would have to try to put those things together and try to figure out, okay, now we've got to have this in a way that we can shoot it and let Earl, because Earl played the title character, lip sync to this. But when he was piecing the stuff together, he was like, wait, this doesn't quite sound like Roy Orbison's voice. And it was because it didn't have that reverb that we all know when we think about Roy Orbison now. There's this very specific reverb that when you listen to his songs, there's something very distinctive about not just the voice, not just the incredible voice, but that little delay as well. And this film, they had concert shots that were recreated in one of the old Charlotte Coliseums. They used Malcolm Brown Auditorium in Shelby, and talking to Earl was just a fascinating story to tell, because it was a drama. It was kind of a departure from the action, revenge pictures that he had typically been a part of before. So Living Legend was definitely one of those that found success, and the soundtrack actually got some love. I think it was the Academy of Country Music, or one of the country music associations was nominated it for soundtrack of the year that year, and Earl said it lost out to a Willie Nelson film. So he said, Willie did it to me. Willie did it to me.
That would have probably been Honeysuckle Rose, I guess.
It might have been.
I think it was, because that was the same year. So yeah, that's amazing. I had forgotten about that, because the previous year was the Elvis film with Kurt Russell, directed by John Carpenter, and Ronnie McDowell had done the singing for that one. So I couldn't remember if Ronnie McDowell stepped over to this one, but yeah, you just jogged my memory. I had forgotten, but yeah, you're right. This was before. I think I read Roy's biography years ago, and it said that he had been reduced to playing state fairs at this point in his career, which was kind of a big come down. Yeah, there it is. Ginger Alden, Earl Owensby, living legend.
I know, yes I know, when I hurt others with things I say or do, with remorse my voice calls out to you. It's me, Lord, I'm asking, what am I worth? Just a man made from clay to return to the earth. Through shame I hear you whisper, you may walk through doubt and hell, but faith can still move mountains. Amazing grace has never failed.
And I would like to just say, from a standpoint of it, from Earl, if you ever get a chance or ever had a chance to meet him, it is his charisma, his energy, his positive outlook, and his never say never attitude that I think continued to push him through those obstacles and those hurdles and those David versus Goliath moments. If you said, no, Earl, you can't do it, he said, watch me. And I love that about his personality and that just capacity to say, just give me a chance. You'll see. Yeah. I'll show you.
The tenacity of a cockroach, as they say.
Absolutely.
Good for him. We could all take a lesson or two from that outlook on life.
Really appreciate you all joining us right here on this Meet Me at the Movies Adam's Corner special crossover edition. Adam, you can find Adam Long's work. If you just search YouTube, look for Adam's Corner, Adam Long, you're going to find his work. Some of his great interviews, including one with Kenneth Johnson, a creator who did a lot of TV back in the 70s and beyond. So I encourage you to go check that out as well. Again, we do appreciate Adam inviting us on his show to talk about Earl Owensby. We're going to continue to celebrate the life of Earl Owensby, looking back at his work, his life, his films, and his interactions going back to 1973 over the course of this next year or so. Thanks for joining us right here on Meet Me in the Movies. Until next time, I'm Noel T. Manning II, and that's a wrap.
Many films to view until we meet again. Next time we see you, we'll gladly fill you in. We'll tell about the happy and the sad ones. We'll talk about the good ones and the bad ones. Many films to view till we meet again.